Well, I'm Doug Wheeler, and welcome back to my listening audience. This is From the Belly. Where did that name come from? Very simple. It's the story of Jonah when Jonah gets um, swallowed by the whale, swallowed by what I refer to as the she-fish. He goes through a transformational process in the deep, in the dark, and transformational things occur in his life. So that's what this podcast is all about. It's not so much a teaching platform, it's an opportunity to talk with practitioners, be a therapist, coach, whatever they want to give themselves a name, but they're a practitioner of healing. And so I've got a guest today that I'm really excited to talk about. I set up a 15, 20-minute kind of get to know each other Zoom call a week ago, and we talked for an hour and a half. So we won't talk that long this time in the podcast, but I learned a lot. And I have Vivian Maraki. Did I get that right, Vivian?
Yeah, Vivian Maraki.
Thank you. Thank you. Don't always trust going on Google and seeing how they tell me to pronounce something because I've been stressing about this all morning. And then I ran it past Vivian. She said, no, it's not pronounced that way. So I'm like, okay. So I got it right, and I'm happy about that. Vivian lives in Toronto. She is a somatic coach, um, somatic practitioner, and we're going to talk about somatics today. Um, I think I want to start with, well, first of all, I want to say there you are and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to talk to you again, Doug.
No, it's just great. Yeah, so how did I meet Vivian? Um, I jumped on LinkedIn, which I rarely do. It always tells me I've got like 25 things that I'm supposed to address. I've never signed up for the premium package. I can't stretch myself to pay $100 a month, but maybe I should. But somehow, and I don't, if somebody said, well, how did it come up, this live strand or whatever? There's Vivian, and she says something in writing, and I say, that's interesting, and I click on it. It was about emotional space and accepting where we are with our emotions, and something very simple, but profound as well. And I said, wow, I'm going to read about Vivian. So I went to her website, and then I had a moment of clarity to say, well, let's get the podcast going again. And she'll be my first practitioner guest. So you are that. And I'm just really, really proud to have you on. So thank you. Thanks for making time.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure. It's
So
really
Toronto,
interesting how those threads, the synchronicity happens.
it sometimes you have to really work hard to get a door to open, and other times it just opens. This one just felt like it just opened. And I think, and I told you this when we were having our Zoom conversation that my dear friend Jonathan Miller, a colleague of mine, who's also a practitioner and a healer, had just gotten back from a somatic training, and he left me a
Mm-hmm.
voicemail saying, "Man, Doug, I went to this training and I went to learn, and sure, I learned, but how did I learn? I learned profoundly by getting into my own experience." So I think he's very open to those kind. That's where I think we really, really learned. So it wasn't just a didactic presentation of somatics, but he was going there to get, I don't think so much credentialed, but to learn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he came back changed. So that's right around the time that I saw you, and so the dots connected. I want to read something that's off of your website.
Sure.
So you wrote it, and
Mm-hmm.
then
I did.
I want you to comment on it.
All right.
And then we're going to talk a bit about your career journey. And there's a backstory of how you got to be where you are. And that always interests me because it helps me understand who somebody is and what they're currently doing because the journey that they've taken to get there. So you write this: feeling seen, heard, and understood is a powerful, my glasses, is a powerful catalyst for healing. It is potent when someone sees, hears, and acknowledges us. But this experience is even more powerful when we do this for ourselves, which is the heart of the somatic coaching experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So most of us, when we communicate, we are communicating with um, a part of ourselves that's waiting to speak, a part of ourselves that's waiting to weigh in with an opinion. I think that we can all relate to those moments where we get really excited to say the thing that we want to say next in response to what the person's saying. While we're hearing them, we're not really listening to them in those moments. And something really powerful happens when we shift into that active listening where we actually just give the person the floor and the space to explore the things that they want to explore and to really listen. And we're not listening to respond, we're listening out of curiosity to just be. And so most of us have not experienced that. And that is particularly why coaching can be such a powerful experience because the coach is there to listen. We're not there to, a lot of people don't, this is something that actually, even for myself, as I became a coach, was new information for me. So I say this from that place that most people don't realize that coaching, it's not about the guidance. It's not about advice. It's not about learning what the coach has to say to you to tell you what you should be doing next. That's mentorship. There's people that do that. Coaching is all about helping you discover and explore what's within you already and the answers within to dig deeper. So a really good coach asks really good questions that ask you to dig deeper to gain the insights into yourself. So I started off with coaching and then I discovered somatics for myself.
Mhm.
And the reason I say that on my website is that somatics is your way of doing it for yourself, doing the same thing where you're holding space and you're just being with yourself and you're allowing what's within you already to bubble up. There's a lot that I can say around the body, around why that happens. Most of us have a lot of experiences in our lives where they may not have, actually, it doesn't even matter, but I'll finish what I was about to say.
Sure.
Some of them may have been traumatic, some of them may not have been pleasant, some of them may have been actually pleasant. Regardless of what happens, we have experiences in our lives. And what was really astounding to me that I realized is that about 80 to 90% of our vagus nerve network actually transmits from body to brain. So the vagus nerve network is important because it is actually the network that underpins our autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is the nervous system that is in charge of overseeing a lot of our automatic responses. So digestion, breathing, a lot of things that are functioning in our body that we don't have to think about. But that also includes emotional responses, stress responses like fight, flight, freeze that a lot of us are really familiar with. So that is important because when we get into that automatic emotional stress response, we are flooded with those transmitters and our body actually is being told to respond in a certain way to help us move into safety, to help us survive. So that includes increased heart rate, it shuts down digestion, blood starts flowing into our limbs so that we can run or fight to get away. In the instance that our system assesses the situation and it seems like there's no way we're going to survive if we fight or if we flee, then we shut down and we freeze and we try to make ourselves really small. And so that's why sometimes we get that freeze and the dissociation that can happen. So why is this relevant? So
Mm.
if the body is wired 80 to 90% from body to brain, that's particularly why it is so hard to try to often think our way out of it. So there's also, I can get into a bit more about, I won't go into extreme detail, but when we think about the brain and the way that it's set up, um, it's actually much more complex than this. So oftentimes when I talk about this in
Mhm.
my masterclass and webinars, I give the disclaimer that our brains it's a lot more complex. It actually all works as a whole. It's a lot more integrated. But just for simplicity's sake, for us to understand what's going on, we break it down into what we call the triune brain. So the brain being made up of these three major parts. There's actually more parts, but we, to simplify it, especially when I'm talking to my own kids, and we talked about this through their kids therapy, and the way that they talk about it to them. So we really get aligned to provide the information in a really consistent way. But I actually put my hand into a fist, and they do too, and just talk about, like if your arm is the brainstem and your hand, your fist is your brain, the base of your palm is like your reptilian brain. So that part is the most basic form. So that's where your autonomic nervous system, feeds into and controls all those automatic things. That is the most primitive part of the brain. That was the first part. And then within the palm is kind of like, the second part of the brain. This is the part of the brain that is responsible for community, social interactions, communication, collaboration, all of that good stuff. And so that was formed, especially as humans or mammals, and we were smaller and we needed to survive. And we actually had to organize ourselves into tribes and communities to help each other to survive. And then this third part, which is the neocortex, responsible for organization, logical thinking, planning, things like that, that came later. So when we go into a fight, flight, freeze response, the brain basically, you know, kind of like shuts off all the parts that are not really necessary.
Mhm.
And the part that stays to help us survive is the reptilian brain. So that combined with the fact that our body is wired mostly from body to brain, and then the fact that most of the other parts of the brain that are higher functioning get turned off, we actually only have access to that reptilian response and then the body. And so the reason somatics work so much, in my opinion, and we have a somatic nervous system that's wired within us, that's part of our overall nervous system, that's responsible for connecting to our central nervous system, as well as, like the parts of our bodies, skin receptors, things like that, that are for sensing and voluntary movement. That part of the brain, um, we can actually access and then tap into and go through the body to basically reset and de-escalate ourselves. So the way to come out of a stress response is actually through the five senses rather than through the brain. So a lot of times if our child is having a tantrum and we're saying, oh, and we're trying to talk to them as we do, the reason it's not really working is because their higher functioning and communications shut off. They're not able to hear. But if we go in through the five senses, it's a lot more effective. And it's exactly the same for adults. So somatics is a practice where it is going in through the five senses, is going into the body and the sensing. And as we experience things through our lives, we actually take in those experiences through our body. The more meaningful, and meaningful can be a positive or a negative thing. And I don't necessarily like attributing those things because emotions, in my opinion, are neutral. It's the meaning that we apply to them that makes it have meaning. But in any case, things that are more meaningful, that leave a lasting impression on us, those are experienced through our body mostly and then recorded. But we have been taught as a society not to really pay attention to those things. We've been taught to ignore them, suppress them, even dismiss them or dissociate from them. So many of us don't necessarily have access to them, and we don't know how to access the body and to pay attention to those things that are going on. And somatics as a practice is all about getting back into the body. And, the root word for somatics is soma, which is a Greek word that means the wholeness of a living organism. So somatics is a practice to get back to understanding and being aware of the wholeness, the aliveness of you as a living organism. And it works because it's working very naturally with the nervous system that already exists within your body,
Mhm.
the way that your body's wired, and basically accessing the body to gain access to the record, so to speak, of the things that your body's holding for you because of the experiences that you've had. And when we're not addressing those things, then they just are held. But when we start addressing them, then that's when they can actually flow and we can actually start releasing some of those things. And then they don't need to take such a precedence in our stress responses and our reactions and other things, which is a lot of what triggers are all about. That was a really long winded
A lot there.
explanation about it. Yeah.
You spoke of records and you spoke of recordings. Could
Mm-hmm.
you say more about how that happens within us,
Yeah. So with somatics, like I'll give an example
please?
actually. So different people, it might be different things, but you know, um, I'll actually, the way I'll explain it is actually describing an experience
That's great.
as an example.
That's
So
wonderful.
in and one of the clients, for example, that I had worked with before, there was a circumstance where there was some interactions that caused a trigger that they noticed. And so we were really working on trying to identify what is a stress response, um, how is the body responding, and how, like, what is the natural conditioning that's happened in order to help that person survive. And so through the session, as we started opening it, and went in, and so I use a lot of mindfulness techniques, visualizations, and this, so we drop into the body and just really spend some time being in the body, noticing and being with the body and being present to the body, learning how to sense and being aware of the things that we're feeling in the body, and then introducing some of that stress response. And we're trying to use something that's like not ex- um, a really heightened stress response that could be extremely triggering, but something kind of more on the medium scale, so to speak. And it really varies depending on the person. The experience that they had, that they ended up accessing, was, oh, there's like some pressure in their chest that they were feeling. It was actually, in their torso, around the torso. But then as they got deeper and as we started working on it more and more, it was actually, they decided, let's look at the chest first. And the visualization that they had was actually, it felt like a javelin that had gone through the chest out the back. So it was a wounding that was existing that they felt would happen when they had certain interactions, that felt really painful to receive. And so a lot of the work that we were doing in that is, okay, like let's like feeling it out, noticing it, and then interacting with that area. And in their case, they're like, actually, I just want to stay still. I don't want to move, because as if there's something that's here.
Mm.
I don't want to touch it because it's like this big wounding. And then we're talking about, okay, like what do we want to do? What does your body desire for you? Like, what would help this get better? And it's like, oh, it feels like maybe I would want this to get treated. So, going down that path. And then over time, and sometimes it takes multiple sessions. And so, we were working on this. And then the next time we came together, it was very noticeable. Oh, like there's like still that pressure. We kind of go in, the javelin is gone. Now it's healing. And so there's a wounding that's still there, but it's healing, it's active. But now I can move. Now I can do other things. Now I can do something with it. And then we actually introduced a new somatic practice that felt right for them, to help them
Mm.
basically, as something's coming at them in the future, what is that physical movement and the different conditioning that we're going to do to help support, not engaging in the usual conditioned response, which is, oh, now I've taken it, now I feel wounded.
Vivian,
And
can
yeah,
I ask a question?
yeah, of
How did
course.
the javelin come out, and how long was that process? Can you
Yeah,
take us
so
right to that place?
in that case, I did not remove the javelin. And actually, the person in our session did not remove the javelin. But it was an intention that as we were talking about it, we would like this to get treated. We explored the kind of place that they would want it to get treated, medical facility, and a
Hmm.
desire for it to be treated. And then there were certain practices and other centering techniques that we did around this to support them. And then the next time that we got together, which actually happened to be 2 weeks, normally my sessions are weekly,
Mm.
but it just so happened that we had a little bit more time, that the next time when they went back in, they noticed, oh, it's gone. So in
Mm.
their case, it wasn't something we actively did. I have had other clients where it is something that we actively do. Like I
Hmm.
have had clients where, it can be something like, in one case, it felt like a cloud, like a dark storm cloud. In other cases, it felt like a wool, depending on what was going on with the person. And they really needed to tease out the wool and work on it. And actually the somatic practice and work that they ended up doing, in between sessions for the weeks, was actually like teasing out and pulling on the wool to detangle it for themselves, to lighten it
So,
up so that they could deal with it.
visualization is a part of the
Mm-hmm.
work,
Yeah.
but I'm going to make an assumption here and correct
Yeah.
me. Um, and I'm happy to be corrected because we want to get it right, for me and for those listening. You're not teaching visualization techniques. Something's happening organically
That's right.
to where the person, and tell me in that case, did the person have the visual, the image of the javelin? Or does
Yes.
you suggest that? And then how does that work? Do you sometimes suggest if you have a sense, or do they most of the time come up with their own pictorial image to work with?
Yeah. So that is a great question. And the answer is, I never suggest. So this all comes out of the body. It comes out of the person
Wow.
themselves. It's person led, and it always comes from them. We actually have this inbuilt ability from a very young age, but we lose the ability as we grow older. So it's relearning. So I do somatic with my own children. So with one of my children, I actually had a situation where I was supporting him through some anxiety that he was feeling. And as we went in, it was the same thing. Like he was able to immediately go, oh, okay, I feel the pressure here, mommy, in my chest. And he put his hand on his heart and we explored it. And he was able to describe it. There was a color that comes up. What does the texture look like? And then what does it want to tell us? Nothing. So in his case, there was nothing. Sometimes there's something that it wants to say. Is there a feeling that you're feeling associated? And then all of a sudden he noticed, oh, I feel sadness about this. Okay. So let's hold that sadness. It's okay. And just giving it time and just taking pauses. And then what happens when we increase our connection with that sadness? What happens if we try to make that sadness feel like it's getting bigger or smaller? And in his case, as he felt in the sadness and started to embody it, it disappeared. He's like, Mommy, it's gone. So it was released. And so sometimes with some of my clients, within one session, that can happen as well. Is, oh, we start feeling into it. It says what it wants to say to us. We take on what we needed to take on, and then it gets released on its own. But that's a process that is very unique to each person, and it really depends on the person.
What's it like for you to be in the presence of um, somebody's body, if you will?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That you're in this place where you're providing some direction, but or you're providing direction question based for the most part, but you're facilitating something, but you're in the presence of not just another person, but you're in the presence of their body.
Mm-hmm.
What is that like for you? And tell us what is it like for you sometimes after a session?
Yeah.
Like
So
what does Vivian do to take care of Vivian?
yeah, that's
That's
a
kind of
great
a two-part
question.
question.
Yeah. So in somatics, we refer to the body as a soma. And so I only bring that up because it feels like there's like that part of that honoring that happens in this process. And so as you say, like I'm in the presence of their soma, they're trusting me with their soma. And I feel that's very strongly that's what it is. It's an honor. And it is to receive the kind of love and trust for this person to hand over their soma for me to hold. So, like we talk about, like coaches, like we create a container, a safe container for that person to be able to come into to explore the things that they want to explore. And it's very vulnerable. So, all coaching is very vulnerable as it is. Somatics, even more so, especially because somatics by
Mm-hmm.
nature is very opening. And sometimes it opens things that we may not expect to be there. And some of it can be trauma. And so
Yes.
I'm trauma informed. I'm actually getting deeper training in trauma and how to manage and help support as well as to heal. Um, Recognizing that I am not a therapist, like there is a differentiation, but also recognizing that there are some blurred lines as well because our past influences our present, which influences our
Oh, yes.
future. Coaches deal with present to future, but there's a heavy influence there. And especially with somatics, it can come up. And so, from my perspective, I am a safe container for them. And it is such an honor to be able to be that safe container. So I think that's the first thing that I feel is a lot of honor. Um, and then the other thing that I was really surprised by in this practice is that there's just always such a deep healing that happens. And what's really fascinating for me is in the past, I had actually looked into therapy and I decided that I actually didn't want to go into therapy. At the very start of my career, I actually started on the front lines of healthcare. And so I know we'll talk a little bit about that
We
later,
will. Yeah.
probably. Yeah. But I burnt out really quickly. And so I know what burnout feels like. I didn't want to go back to that space. And so, like you were saying and alluding to in your question, self care is really important. What's really interesting about this work, though, is I feel like it's such a healing space that I don't feel like I'm giving away my energy of healing. It feels like it is this reciprocating space and flow back and forth
Mm.
where I'm maintaining the container and they're doing this healing. And it's actually their body, their soma, their spirit that is courageous enough to actually go in and face it to do this healing and start unlocking things for themselves. And so in that way, I leave my sessions feeling so much more energy and feeling just having partaken in that is almost ceremonious in a way. Like it's
Mm.
such a beautiful thing. So I walk away feeling actually really good. Um, there hasn't been I actually have not had a session yet where I've walked away feeling depleted in some way. And so, in that way, I feel like my self care is not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
after client sessions. My self care is actually working on myself, my own healing, my own growth, because the more I work on myself, the bigger my own container gets. and the bigger my container is, then the more I'm able to hold for my
Mm.
clients. So I do notice that sometimes when I'm doing my own healing, if I'm feeling a little bit, like processing and lower energy than normal, it's harder to hold the container. So I'm really mindful of that. Uh, but yeah, I feel like my self care is very much about being just constantly self aware, knowing where I'm at, what I feel like my soma needs, and I do the practice and I do the work as well, and it's been very transformative for me.
Is there a typical length of a session?
My sessions are all 60 minutes in length, and it feels like so far it feels like a good sweet spot. I have tried, uh, you know, 40, 45, 50
Hmm.
minutes.
Hmm.
And I feel like 60 minutes, especially with the somatics, is the time that feels right because it feels like there's enough space for
Hmm.
there to be
Hmm.
ease. Some people have felt like they finished, so like, finished a session within 40 minutes. And in that case, great.
Yeah.
But if there's the need for more time, then at least we have it. So yeah, all the sessions are 60 minutes.
And what about those folks that will even self admit that they're intense, be it type A or however we want to frame that, and they say, give me a double session. I want to do, I want to come in and do 120 minutes or more. So,
Yeah.
what do you do those? Do you find that to be an interesting thing to have a conversation with them about? Is that informing you of something that might get in the way of the work? It's just kind of where's your mind go with that?
Yeah, I think so long as someone is open and willing to do the work and open to investing in themselves in that way and facing the things that come up and keep an open mind in terms of the practice, then 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 I can work with them. I haven't yet had someone come in and say they wanted a longer session for, like double the time, for example, but I almost liken it to, when you go for a workout. So there's
Hmm.
there's
Hmm.
a point at which there's kind of limiting returns. Um, for I would say, so like if I were to go for a workout, I could work out for 2 hours. Like I could get a personal trainer and do a double session for two
And some
hours and just
do.
be more tired, and some do. I like there have been points in time that I did that with spin class. Like I do a double session just to see if I could do it, you
Hmm.
know
Sure.
but you've kind of got these diminishing returns. It's not like you necessarily accelerate any faster. I personally look at healing like the healing process is the process. The rate at which you heal is the rate at which you heal. There isn't a way to accelerate it or anything. But
Hmm.
I will say though that while I'm someone that does not believe in a quick fix or anything like that, what I have been really surprised by is that somatics has been like I've seen it to be very effective
Hmm.
right from the onset. So it doesn't take a lot of sessions for people to start to feel really the impacts from it.
So you've seen it
So
work.
I have seen it work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very quickly.
Um, my mind is going to the concept of resistance,
Hmm.
and then we can even talk about. There's so much being said these days about the inner critic,
Yeah.
and then we could talk from the IFS model about the different parts
Hmm.
and how they run cover. And I think some of the older language in the IFS model was firefighters that show up,
Yeah.
to shut everything down really quickly. So as we think just kind of broadly about resistance, and we think about the inner critic, and we think about the IFS model and these parts, the protective parts, what is your experience? What is your your orientation towards that? And then maybe you could give us an example of somebody
Hmm.
um, where you met some of that resistance, no matter what we call it. You knew that it was an energy that was trying to, in some ways, thwart the work,
Hmm.
but also trusting the body. I see that's an interesting connection there, or interesting, almost paradox of because I'm also thinking, and I'll finish with this, that often we're very suspect. Um, I am the people that I know that even go through restorative, transformational healing experiences. Sometimes it can really revert back to really doubting the experience.
Yes. Yes. And I have seen
Um,
that.
yeah, I had somebody weigh in recently just to say, Doug, it was real, but I also think it was all made up.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's an interesting thing to interact with as a
Yeah.
practitioner. But I said a lot. Where's your mind going?
Yeah. So first of all, the resistance. Um, for me, resistance is the opportunity to explore. And when we feel resistance, it means that something is not aligning with us. I also feel that I move at the pace of my clients. So it is really 100% based on their comfort level and what they feel good about. So I won't push them further than what they're prepared to go. We need to push sometimes because it's actually in the resistance that we can actually find the
Mm,
insights and the answers. Those are the limiting beliefs, those are the conditioned responses, those are the things holding us back. So we do push up against them, but we push up against them at someone's own pace as they're ready. And that is part of the safety and the trauma informed. That's really essential to, I think, this work. If we break that trust, then I feel like like we could really do some damage.
mm,
So I think that's number one. As we push up against the resistance, and this has come up with a number of my clients, and it's funny because as they work with me, they start to notice their own resistance. They're like, "Oh, I'm noticing this resistance. Let's go explore and see what's going on." And let's go into that part of the body that I'm feeling it, and let's see what's coming up. And oftentimes it is a protection, like you say, like it's like something is there that like it might be like a tension in the back, or
mhm.
um, like some like a knot of some kind, or some kind of pressure, like depending on what it is with them. I'll actually use my an example actually from my own life,
Thank you.
where this had happened. So um, I had been really, working really hard on getting my practice and my company launched. Getting my website up, creating my packages and my programs and curriculums and things like this. But I also was at a point where I was seeing family and wanting to spend time with my children and trying to balance it all. So the way that I was trying to balance was that I was spending so I'd wake up really early in the morning and then work for about 3, 4 hours and then spend time with my family. And then after my kids went to bed, I would spend probably another 5, 6 hours to
Oh,
catch up
goodness.
on all of the work. So I ended up, like a lot of late nights, a lot of early mornings.
All right.
And I did get to a point where I was like, okay, I think like I'm getting a little tired. But I also was looking at the light at the end of the tunnel in the sense that I had a trip coming up. That was my rejuvenation time, and my kids were going to be going back with their dad, and so I knew that let's make the most of the time that we have together. So we did that. When I went on my trip, so first of all, I did end up getting a very mild cold, which turned into, in my case, it often turns into bronchitis. So I knew something was up. So my
Mm,
body's dealing with this. And for whatever reason, the entire part from the back of my neck all the way down my back was so tight. Like it just it normally doesn't get like that. So something's going on. But I also noticed in myself that I don't feel like slowing down. I don't want to because I have so much to do. I need to
mm,
blah blah
mm.
blah, right? All these things. Like I think that's pretty common. But then also in observing that, it's like, well, look at this resistance to slowing down. Like, look at this resistance to your body saying it needs rest. Like you're like you have a cold. You actually got legitimately sick this time.
The body's telling the truth, right?
The body is telling the truth. And so that evening, I actually just lay straight flat on my bed. I didn't do any work. I put it all away, and I just lay on that bed. And then I did my own somatic practice, and I went in and was like, okay, where am I feeling this? Lungs is one place, obviously, because the bronchitis was there. But then the back I was feeling it a lot more. So I went into my back and just started interacting with my back as I would do with my clients. And what
Mm,
was really interesting that came up is like my back basically was saying, I want to be pliable, but I can't because I have to be armor to protect you from yourself because you're working way too much.
mm.
Like, what are you doing this for? And it really pushed me to reflect, and like some of the visualizations came up around the kind of armoring and skin that it wanted to be. Like, yeah, I can still be there, but it doesn't have to be full armor. It can be like a lot more flexible kind. And what was also really interesting was this idea of mangosteen came up. So I don't know if you're familiar with the fruit mangosteen. It's
Uh,
a really pretty purple fruit with
that's
kind of
as
like
much as
a,
I know about it.
yeah, and then it's got kind of like a leathery skin, and on the inside, it's a very fleshy, white, fleshy
Mm.
fruit. And my body was basically saying, we would like to get you to the point where your body feels like the fleshy fruit, just really soft again.
So that's what you were
Um,
hearing.
yeah, like that was what was coming up from my body,
Mm.
is like fleshy mangosteen fruit. And then the armor is like the leathery armor of a mangosteen, like just really light, still protective, not too much, but still present, versus this hard, metallic armor that had come up in my visualizations that was causing a lot of this
Mm.
weight and just feeling heavy and the tenseness. And the moment that I did the repair work, so I really look at this as repair work with my body. So similar to when we have we what we call a rupture in a relationship with someone else. So if I broke someone's trust, I did something, I hurt their feelings. The repair is really essential. And so I would go to them and I would do the repair. I would acknowledge what I did wrong. I would apologize, etc. So I also do this with myself. And that for me, when I started thinking about it that way, it was one of those moments where I feel like it's really changed and shifted my relationship with myself,
Mm.
in my honor and respect of my with myself. I'm no longer afraid of making mistakes. It's been really freeing, because if I make a mistake, I'm only human. I can still do the repair. So
I
that's what
see.
I did that evening. I went with my body. It's like, I'm sorry that I put us through this.
Mm.
I think I pushed things a bit too hard. I think you're right. I'm going to do my best to be more mindful. I'm really going to take a break this week, and I'm going to get some rest. So on that note, I'm going to bed. So, I went to bed
So
right after that
it changed
practice.
your behavior.
It did. It did. And
Um,
then the next day, I felt great. Like all of the tension in my back was gone completely. And so, that was an example of a
mm.
resistance that had come up, where I noticed, okay, you know, I I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to slow down, but actually because I felt that way, that was a good reason for me to look
Mm.
into it a little bit more, into what's coming up for me. Why don't I want to slow down? What's the underlying reasons? And what changes for me when I access my body and get more into alignment? And in my case, there was a fear. Like, if I don't push this hard or get this thing done, if I don't, all these things, but rather when I'm in alignment, things happen, like those opportunities end up coming. There's no rush to these things, just like healing. There's no rush to healing. You can't rush it. It's just going to take the time that it takes. And I believe life is the same way.
Well, that's a simple but profound story. Um, and so it fits into that reading off of your website that this experience is even more profound when we do this for ourselves,
Hmm.
which is the heart of the somatic coaching experience. So
Yeah.
you applied that to you.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, yeah. My bet is, I can say this for myself, and my bet is everybody listening, they won't forget that story. They might forget some of what you said,
Hmm.
right, about somatics and kind of the mechanics of it. It doesn't mean it wasn't important, and they might be able to pull from it, or they'll need to go back and say, "Oh, let's see now, what did Vivian say about that? Okay, I'm going to go get a refresher course, if you will." But they won't forget that story
Hmm.
because it was felt, and I think that kind of leads us back to the power, not only the power of story, but my focal point is how the body takes this in and records it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I think about Vivian, I'll think about you laying down on your bed and having a session with yourself, and good things came from it.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Let's spend a few minutes. I mentioned it, and I want to get to it. Let's spend maybe 5, 6, up to 10 minutes. You spoke of a different career before this,
Hmm.
and I'm going to assume that in that career, at some point, you never imagined doing this intimate healing, restorative work as a healer, as a practitioner. Um, where were you before, and how in the world did you get to where you are now?
Yeah. So it's interesting, Doug, because I was that type A person that you talk about. Like, I was that, you know, can't slow down, fast moving
Short
executive,
sleeper eyes.
short sleeper, as I was mentioning, that was creeping into my new life. And my
Right.
body's like, not this again.
Right.
Let's get rid of
Right.
that pattern, you know?
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So I started my career in healthcare. Um, if I was to go back even further, I actually, what's interesting is that I always wanted to pursue the creative arts. And I originally wanted to go into furniture making and industrial design, but I was strongly discouraged. I come from a very traditional, conservative Chinese background. So we don't have as many career options as a joke. It's true, but it's a
oh,
joke.
okay.
And so I went into science, on the path to become a medical practitioner of some kind. So whether that
Mm,
is a doctor or, a dentist or what have you. And it was science for me because I was really drawn to healthcare. I had spent many years volunteering, and I really loved this idea of helping people and supporting them in the process. And so as I got started, what I found really quickly is that I burnt out really quickly. And I was not able to compartmentalize the different aspects
mm,
of the work that I was doing in support of people. And I realized now I was an empath and I was just absorbing all of it, and I didn't know what to do and how to deal with it. So I know how to do that now. But I pivoted when I realized that this was not the path for me. But I wanted to do something that would still support the industry from behind the scenes. And what that was for me was strategic communications. And then later on, I fell into marketing. So early in my career, I started off with an integrated marketing and advertising company, um, and did a lot of, I was fortunate that I still got to do a lot of my passion projects working with health organizations, government agencies, etc. And then ended up falling into an opportunity where I went overseas to Afghanistan for, it ended up being almost 2 years that I was there. So I was working on launching the marketing and brand for a telecommunications company over there. And then later ended up working with the United Nations on the parliamentary elections and the public outreach to help encourage and educate people
mm,
on voting. I came home after that experience and worked for a more corporate environment, and just realized at that point that digital was going to completely revolutionize the landscape of how we did things. And at the time I was just thinking about communications and marketing. I wasn't even
mm,
thinking about people's lives.
mm,
And so I decided to pursue an organization that did that at the heart of their business. So I traveled to Toronto, where I am now, and I reached out to a number of organizations, just wanted to chat. Like, these were not interviews or anything like that, just conversations, just to see, how does a person like me join an industry like this? And one conversation with one organization turned into three or four over the span of a week. And I was still traveling even within the province. And by the end of, I think it was like 1.5 weeks to 2 weeks, I had an offer. And then 2 weeks later, I moved, and then I landed in Toronto. So that was the start of that. I would say focused marketing career, especially within digital communications. And then the same thing happened, but I didn't move anymore. No more moving
mm,
to different or different cities or anything like that. But I also then pivoted into social media when it felt like that was going to be a game changer, and then analytics and big data. And then later, it was only after that that I wanted to get back into the heart of what felt more aligned to me. So I started working a lot with consulting agencies that only dealt with social impact brands, and then moving into supporting those social impact brands. Um, and then later on, I started focusing and went back to healthcare. So I worked with a number of different startup organizations that were really focused on mental health and healthcare. And near the end of that time, I just felt like, okay, like I feel like there's more. Like, I feel like there's something more that I want to do. I feel like I want a bigger impact
what
on
year would that
people.
have been, Vivian?
That probably would actually fairly, I think that it started about 4 years ago, so
Okay.
around 2000.
Okay.
But it was still just an idea percolating. And then became really poignant probably about 2 years ago, where I just felt like, okay, like, I think that this is likely the last company that I'll ever work for, and
Mm,
the time is now. I felt strongly called towards get up now. It's time. Like, you
mm,
need to move. And so I was like, move where? Like, move to what? Like, I don't know what that is. And started exploring, and went back into some of the earlier ideas that I had around coaching, And I had a conversation with someone from the organization that I ended up getting trained at, and it was just like like the feeling was this energetic alignment that everything clicked into place. I was like, this is the place,
Wow.
amongst all these other places that I had been exploring. And I signed up right away and I enrolled. And then soon after that, I had been really invested in my own healing process. So I actually had found a trauma therapist that I wanted to unlock and deal with a lot of things that I knew were lying dormant within me.
Mm.
And I specifically wanted someone that dealt with somatics. And so I started, interacting with that practice, and that just changed my trajectory like completely. Because what I found was that in even a month of somatic work, I felt like I had grown and had more breakthroughs than I had in many years of talk therapy. And I felt like it was so powerful that it's something that I could probably integrate in my coaching practice as well. So I went and got trained and certified in somatic work through an organization, and have been integrating into my practice since. But it's definitely been a journey, and it's interesting because for many coaches, they look back and say, uh, marketing is the hardest part and the part that most people dislike the most. And I feel fortunate that I ended up on this journey where I just spent more than 20 years as a marketer.
Yes.
So, okay, like it's still a lot of work because like I used to have whole teams that would work with me on these things. Now I have to do it all myself and figure it out. But fortunately, the technology has progressed so much that we have a
Mm.
lot of support and templates, and it's not all, bespoke coded anymore. Like there's a lot
Okay.
of out of the box solutions. So anyway, yeah. So here I am now.
Yeah, that's when I complimented you last time on your website.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
said, now, I said, and remember that? I said, now I
Yeah.
understand why your website is really, 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 really good. And you said, well, I've had a lot of practice at it.
Yeah.
You do a lot of YouTube work, Instagram work. I have, thank you for sharing your journey there of how you
Oh, my
got to.
pleasure.
I'm sure some people would want to know more. We don't have time, but I'm sure some people would want to know at what point did you make the leap? And how did you trust the leap? Because it sounds like there was a leap and then things were aligning. And I'm sure that they were working kind of in tandem. But there is that
Mm,
place of taking a risk,
yeah.
leaving something behind. And like you said, I think this is the last company I'm ever going to work for. Um, that's that's an interesting conversation just about these risks that were, and use the word called. I'm in
Yeah.
the second half of my life, and so when you see that time is shorter, and people at my age say, in many different ways, say they can see the end. Um, they've seen those go before them, that have been released on. And so, yeah, this whole thing about calling and journey and trust and risk taking and all of that is really important. That's for another time. Um, I went to one of your Instagrams,
Yeah.
and uh, it was so well done. So, folks, just Google Vivian's name, and you'll find. Is it, or do you want to give us any kind of navigation before I read something from one of your Instagrams? And that's
Oh,
the way we're
sure.
going to see one another out of this experience. But
Yeah.
any touch points you want to give, your web address, YouTube, and all those good things, and how
Yeah.
somebody can start working with you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm vivianmaraki.com on my website. And then all of my social handles are the same, Vivian Maraki. So if
Now,
anyone searches for Vivian Maraki, they'll find me.
you must know that that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Okay, keep it simple.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, well that's good. That's easy.
Yeah.
Great. In your Instagram, um, I didn't write it all out, but I wrote one little portion, then you can kind of add to it. Um, I think the title of the Instagram was Being Honest and Speaking Up. That's what you were speaking to. And somewhere in the maybe 2 minutes of content, you said this: we walk on and we don't have to add a lot of meaning to it. And if I understood you correctly, it's walking on from something that's not working, be it a relationship, be it a job, whatever it be. It's time to go.
Mm.
But the thing that really stood out to me was, um, and we don't have to add a lot of meaning to it. We don't have to add a lot of meaning to the exit.
Mhm.
What do you mean by this? We don't have to add a lot of meaning. When do we add meaning to it? And how do we do
Yeah.
that? And what does it mean just to be able to not do that? Because it sounds liberating.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that a lot of times we're really dragged down because of the things that we've attributed to something and the meaning that we've given it. And of course, things are meaningful. Painful
Mm,
things hurt us. Exits can be very difficult. Goodbyes are difficult. Um, but I look at these things as opportunities, actually. So to share a small personal piece from my own life,
please.
and
And we
this
have
helps
time.
to answer, yeah, a little bit from what you were saying before. Um, I knew that something was dramatically shifting about 4 years ago. The way that I sometimes describe it is I blew up my life 4 years ago in the sense that something wasn't right. I felt like life was dry. I felt like I was a shadow of my former self. I didn't feel alive anymore. I felt like, is this it? Like I'm a mother. I love my children, but maybe I'm not the main character of my own story. Maybe I'm just a side character that's a supporting character that helps at the time my husband reach his dreams, that will raise and nurture my children to reach their dreams. Maybe that is my purpose here. And I felt really sad about that. And something shifted when I started working for the company at the time, one of the healthcare companies that I started working for, and seeing the impact that we were starting to make. And it was a dramatic shift, like a remembering of who I am, that no, I am the main character of my story. I'm the one that has the pen in hand that I get to write. And I don't have to just resign myself to compromising and saying, well, I guess this is it, because it doesn't have to be it. And something really shifted. And I really started to look at everything and going, okay, well, like, what do I want? I want to have an impact. I want to make a difference for people. I want positive change. I want transformation for myself and those around me. And what I then realize is, what do I need to do to live my best life? What do I need to do to live in the highest vibration that I can and be that influence and impact to other people? And it came with some really tough choices.
Mm,
I ended up walking away from more than, by that time, it was probably 15-year marriage or relationship. Marriage was a little bit less. Um, Ended up needing to move out of my house, get my own place. Ended
mm,
up, really recognizing what was going on in the organization that I really loved and was a big part of. And
mm,
then, ended up parting ways from them, with them. And so those are some really big changes where on paper it looked my life was perfect. Everything was tickety boo, but then I wasn't feeling really good about those things. And I
mm,
think that is the first indicator, and the flag is, how do you feel? Do you feel like you're in alignment? Do you feel at peace and calm? Do you feel full? Do you feel alive? Um, and if not, then that's a place to start looking, and that is part of the resistance that we talked about earlier, is like, we
mm,
just that's a cue that we can start looking, and it can take some time, but once you start stepping forward, something amazing happens, because the moment you start stepping forward and leaning into your own alignment and your purpose, and you start paying attention to your inner voice and your inner truth, then that voice gets louder, and it becomes more and more clear what the next step is. You don't need to know what the destination is. You only need to know what the next step is and to take that next step.
mm, mm.
So that largely has been my experience and my journey. And now I'm realizing that I forgot the original question that you just asked me just now.
That's fine because you got into something beautiful there. Um, it was that when we do walk away from
Yeah.
something, be it a relationship or whatever, um, that we don't. How did you word it? We don't have to add a lot of meaning to it.
Yeah.
Could you give
Yeah.
just an example of
Yeah.
something that's very identifiable to where we often do? You would example it by, this is a way that you would add meaning to it, which maybe means you ruminate about it and you carry it and it's burdensome, as opposed to, we don't have to do that.
Hmm.
And so give us a picture of that if you would, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of us, man, do we hold on, or it holds on to us or whatever.
Yeah, oftentimes the meaning is attached to us. We take it personal. Like there's
Right.
something wrong with us, or there's some rejection of us, or we're not enough, we're not valued enough. That is why it hurts so much when we go through an exit or a goodbye or something like that. And oftentimes
Or somebody's done with us.
that's right. That's right. It's painful. Whether it's an organization, like right now, there's a lot of layoffs. It's
Mm,
painful. Like it feels traumatic for people.
that's right.
Breakups happen, divorce, etc.
That's
So
right.
like even friendships that don't work out anymore. What is the meaning we're applying to it? It doesn't have to mean that you're not good enough. Instead, it can mean what else is next. Like it's an opportunity
Mm,
to look at what is coming. So to give a very short example,
mm,
I had an experience with an organization where we needed to part ways. We both knew it. And in the end, they decided to have the conversation with me first. And so,
mm,
in that conversation, as we were approaching it, um, what was really interesting was they came in, like I basically had to ask them. I was like, "Is this a layoff?" And they said, yes.
yes.
It actually is. I was like, "Okay, no problem. Great. So, how would you like to proceed?"
Mm,
And then we had the conversation and we talked about it. And we
mm,
talked about what they wanted and what I wanted. And some of the things I pushed back on, I said I would prefer it if we could do it like this. And they, pushed back and said, well, we would prefer it this way for these reasons. I'm like, okay. So um, like let's work it out. Let's figure out how we want to proceed. And the reason I was able to have the conversation with them like that is because I didn't look at it like, oh, the layoff means I'm not good enough. The layoff means um, they don't want me anymore. Well, they kind of don't because it is a conversation, but actually it went both ways. Like we both
mm,
knew for a long
mm,
time that the fit wasn't there.
mm, mm,
And so it doesn't have to go deeper than let's call a spade a spade. It's not working out. This is
mm,
no longer a fit. We've fallen out of alignment. We're going to figure out how to part ways as gracefully as we can in a way that, hopefully both sides feel like comfortable and
mm.
that they're getting the best possible value from the departure.
Sounds like
And
you had, sounds like you had at that moment clarity of what it did mean
mhm,
and clarity of what it didn't mean. And
yeah,
so you didn't deepen some attachment to an
hmm,
habituated way to see yourself and, be it, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure. I mean, all the conclusions that we can so easily come to. And then
yeah,
that just
exactly.
drags us into the future. It's sure a different approach to the future than what you said, as opposed to you're saying, aren't you? The door opens.
The door
It
opens.
could be a
Yep.
very uncomfortable time. It's that
Yes.
liminal space time, but something's coming. And I
Yeah.
think often we can be more patient than we ever know if we do have that sense of hope. Something is coming, it's unidentifiable, as opposed to what feels at times like just a fruitless wait. It's like, what am I waiting for?
Hmm.
And then you see all the bad choices that all of us have made in those spaces. And sometimes really life altering. Yeah, you speak to that job piece of layoffs and firings. Wow. I work only with men. And so I hear it from that perspective.
Hmm.
And all the things that come into a sense of identity and purpose and what a man is supposed to be able to do and never let go of and
Yeah.
never have happen to him and all of that. Um, it's a very difficult space.
Hmm.
So
It's
I'm,
it's deep into the pride and the identity, like you
yeah, it
said.
really,
It's
really is.
painful.
It's very,
Hmm.
my mind is just going to certain individuals sitting in that space right now. So yeah. Well,
And no
this has
judgment
been,
on them
oh, no
for
judgment
being there
on them.
either, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
It's
resilience and
hard.
stamina. Oh, it's hard. To have that 40th, let's say, job interview, um, and just be prepared for, okay, not going to get that one. One more down. How many more? Um, well, this has been a joy.
Thank you. It
This
always
has
is,
been a
Doug.
joy. Been a joy. Anything you want to say about yourself and your work as we say goodbye to one another today? And people know how to find you. They'll find you
Yeah.
by your name.
Yeah, that's right. Find me by
That,
my name.
that's
And if
fantastic.
anyone is interested, my My somatic program is a little bit different in the sense that uh, I do my programs in almost like a curriculum, so it's a whole package. And I combine both one-on-one personal sessions with some group practice. So what I mean by group practice is that there are somatic exercises that we do that I work through and teach my
Hmm.
clients. And then on a regular basis, we get together as a group. So the cohort of people that I'm working with and also past clients are welcome to come as well. And we come together and we all do the practice together. There's something
This is
about
all
that collective
virtual.
energy. It's all
This
virtual.
all
Yeah.
virtual.
Yeah.
Okay.
All my clients, I don't think there's a single one of my clients I've worked with in the same city
Okay.
as me.
Okay.
So everyone is everywhere. Yeah. But it's all virtual and we do the practice together also on an ongoing basis. So there's the two sides of things where there's integrating, because for me it's so essential to give the right supports to people to integrate it into a more daily routine and practice. So at the very least, if someone ends up not being able to do the somatics in their day-to-day life on the regular, there's two opportunities every week that they would do it. So it's my
So
way of trying to help support them to bring it in on a more regular basis to help them
yeah,
improve.
I like that. I think folks will like that as well. Um, so I'm in the U.S., so we're welcome to cross the border and come see you.
Yes, absolutely. You're
Okay.
definitely welcome.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. To meet you on the screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Vivian, thank you. This has been really a joyful time with you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
as
for the
well.
beautiful, yeah, thank you for the beautiful work that you do. And until next time, bless you and all the great work that you do.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for
Yeah.
finding me.
Yes.